But you were 8 years into the show, right, when you got fired?
That's right,
And
yeah.
what was the straw that broke the camel's back?
I just think it came down to enough was enough. I think I can't really say because we had so many fights before where it wasn't an official firing, but I was asked to leave a few times. But I think it just came down.
He was the creative genius behind a reality TV empire, the artist who brought motorcycle dreams to life by sculpting steel and chrome into rolling masterpieces that captivated a nation. The bikes he built were legendary modern myths forged in fire and metal, born from a vision that was truly one of a kind. For a while, it seemed like the perfect American story. A family business, a father and son, building a dynasty from the ground up. They were on top of the world. The show, American Chopper, was a cultural phenomenon, pulling in millions of viewers who were just as mesmerized by the artistry as they were by the drama. But then, in one unforgettable moment, the dream shattered. In a fit of rage, Paul Teutul Sr. pointed at his son and shouted the words that would echo for years. "You're terminated!" He was the prodigy of metal and flame, raised not on fairy tales, but on grinding wheels and the blinding flash of a welder's torch. And while the world saw chrome and steel, a family was tearing itself apart on screen for everyone to see. This is the heartbreaking tragedy of Paul Teutul Jr. and the decade-long feud that destroyed a dynasty. How did a father-son team that captivated millions devolve into a bitter war that left wounds far deeper than the steel they forged? In the early 2000s, reality television was packed with survivalists and singing competitions. Then, a show emerged from a garage in Montgomery, New York that was unlike anything else. American Chopper wasn't just about building motorcycles. It was about the raw, unfiltered, and often brutal dynamic of a family business. At its heart were two towering figures, Paul Teutul Sr., the gruff, intimidating patriarch with a formidable mustache and an even more formidable temper, and his son, Paul Teutul Jr., the quiet, brooding artist who was the real creative engine of the company. Paul Jr. wasn't just an employee, he was the visionary. From the time he was 12, he was apprenticing in his father's steel business, Orange County Iron Works. He wasn't raised like other kids. His childhood was spent under immense pressure in a workshop his father ruled with an iron fist. There were no gentle words of encouragement, only the relentless expectation to perform, to push, to become as tough as the metal he was shaping. This upbringing was made even tougher by a turbulent home life. His parents divorced, and his father's struggles with alcoholism created a household defined by constant strain. Paul Jr. would later admit that his childhood was filled with a sense of loss and loneliness. He learned to channel that quiet turmoil into his work. When Paul Sr. decided to pivot from fabricating steel railings to building custom bikes in 1999, he founded Orange County Choppers and brought his son on as the chief designer and fabricator. It seemed like a partnership destined for greatness. Senior had the business smarts and the imposing presence. Junior had the God-given talent. Together, they started building bikes that weren't just vehicles, but statements. Their work quickly started landing on magazine covers and dominating motorcycle shows. Then, in 2002, the Discovery Channel came knocking. A one-off special wowed audiences, not just with the bike build, but with the explosive family fights. A full series was commissioned, and American Chopper was born. Almost overnight, the Teutuls became household names. The world was fascinated by the process. It always started with Paul Jr. sketching, his mind seeing shapes and forms that others couldn't. He had an uncanny knack for translating a theme, a spider, a fighter jet, a tribute to fallen heroes, into a breathtaking design. The Black Widow bike, with its intricate web detailing, became an instant classic. The Fire Bike, built to honor the firefighters of 9/11, was a masterpiece of storytelling in metal, a rolling testament to heroism that left viewers in awe. These weren't just projects. They were Paul Jr.'s soul, laid bare in steel. He was the artist, the prodigy. Orange County Choppers was built on his innovative designs, a fact that seemed obvious to everyone but the one person whose approval he craved most. For millions of viewers, the arguments were the main event. The shouting matches, the throne, chairs, the stormed-off exits, it was all riveting television. But what the cameras were capturing wasn't manufactured drama. It was a symptom of a deeply dysfunctional relationship that had been festering for years. The success and intense pressure of the show's production schedule only poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning. The conflict was often framed around simple workplace issues. Paul Jr. was habitually late, a habit that drove his punctual, disciplinarian father into a rage. Senior saw it as disrespect, a lack of discipline. For Junior, maybe it was a passive form of rebellion, a small way to push back against a father who demanded total control. Their creative visions clashed. 2. Senior was a traditionalist, a businessman focused on what was practical and what would sell. Junior was the artist, always wanting to push boundaries, innovate, and experiment. But the roots of their conflict ran much deeper than tardiness or design philosophy. It was a classic story of a father who, having battled his own demons, including a well-documented past with addiction, exerted immense control over his family. His way was the only way. His approval was the currency of the household, and it was a currency he rarely spent. He had built his first company through sheer force of will, and he ran Orange County Choppers the same way. He was the boss, the patriarch, the king. Paul Jr., on the other hand, was the sensitive, creative soul trapped in this hyper-masculine world. He was living under the insane pressure of working 60 to 80 hours a week in a high-stress environment, all while navigating the emotional minefield of his father's volcanic temper. The arguments on TV weren't just about deadlines. They were about a son desperate for his father's validation and a father who seemed incapable of giving it. In his book, The Build, Paul Jr. detailed this conflict, painting a picture of a relationship that was rocky long before the cameras ever showed up. The middle child, Mikey Teutul, was often caught in the crossfire. He was the court jester, the comic relief, and the wannabe peacemaker who desperately tried to diffuse the tension between his father and older brother. His fun-loving nature often masked the pain of being the overlooked son, forever trying to find his place between two clashing egos. Mikey's attempts to mediate were usually pointless, and he became a tragic figure in his own right. His spirit slowly eroded by the constant conflict he was powerless to stop. In 2007, a business decision set the stage for the final act. Paul Sr. gave his son a 20% stake in Orange County Choppers, a move that seemed like a step toward solidifying his legacy. But crucially, Sr. kept full control for himself. This wasn't a partnership of equals, it was a leash. And in the years to come, it would become a chain that Paul Sr. would use to try and drag his son down. The breaking point, when it finally came, was as dramatic and public as anyone could have imagined. It was the climax of years of resentment, a final irreparable fracture in a relationship that had been cracking for decades. On April 9, 2009, an argument just like countless others began to escalate. It started with the usual theme, Paul Jr.'s tardiness. But this time, something was different. The anger was hotter, the words were sharper, and there was no turning back. On camera, for millions to see, Paul Sr. unleashed a storm of fury. The argument spiraled out of control, shifting from professional gripes to deeply personal attacks. This wasn't about shop hours anymore. It was about respect, control, a father's disappointment, and a son's defiance. The other employees, men, who were like family, could only watch in stunned silence as the two pillars of their world came crashing down. In a fit of rage, Paul Jr. grabbed a chair and hurled it against a wall. It was a moment of pure, raw frustration, the physical release of a lifetime of being pushed to the edge. For Paul Sr., it was the ultimate act of insubordination. He didn't see a cry of anguish, he saw a challenge to his authority. His response was swift, brutal, and final. He pointed a finger at his son, his voice thick with rage, and delivered the line that became the show's most infamous moment. "You are terminated!" It was more than a firing. It was a disownment. In that moment, Paul Sr. wasn't just a boss firing an employee, he was a father exiling his son from the kingdom they had built together. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the raw, painful aftermath. Paul Jr., shocked and defeated, packed his things and walked out of the shop he had helped build, leaving behind not just a job, but his family and his legacy. TLC, the network airing the show, was in a tough spot. Their contract required both, Paul Sr. and Paul Jr., to be on the show. A desperate attempt was made to patch things up, and for a short time, Paul Jr. returned to work for OCC. But the damage was done. The trust was shattered, and the relationship was beyond repair. By the end of April 2009, Paul Jr. left Orange. County choppers for good. The golden age was over. The war had just begun. The on-screen explosion was only the beginning. The real battle, the one that would drag on for years and cost a fortune in legal fees, was fought not in the workshop but in New York's courtrooms. Paul Sr. wasn't content with just firing his son. He wanted to erase him from the company entirely. He decided to use a contractual option that he believed gave him the power to buy out Paul Jr.'s 20% ownership stake in Orange County Choppers. This wasn't a friendly negotiation, it was a hostile takeover. Paul Sr. filed a lawsuit against his own son to force the sale, initially demanding over $1 million in damages and claiming Jr. had hurt the company. It was a stunning act of aggression that turned a family feud into a bitter legal war. In April 2010, the first ruling came down in favor of Paul Sr. A judge ruled that the buyout clause was legitimate and ordered an appraiser to determine the value of Paul Jr.'s shares. It was a devastating blow for Jr. It looked like his father was going to succeed in stripping him of his piece of the family legacy. The two men sat in court together without even making eye contact, the silence between them heavier than any machine they had ever built. But Paul Jr. refused to be crushed. He and his legal team appealed the decision, arguing that the buyout provision was fatally flawed. The clause said the shares would be sold for a fair market value, as determined by a procedure to be agreed to by the parties. Since the two of them were clearly never going to agree on anything, Jr.'s lawyers argued the clause was just an agreement to agree, which isn't legally enforceable. While the appeal was pending, Paul Jr. fired back with a legal bombshell of his own. He countersued his father for massive fraud. The lawsuit claimed Paul Sr. had used company funds for personal expenses and engaged in shady business practices, painting a dark picture of the inner workings of the Teutul empire. Then, in December 2010, everything changed. The appellate court delivered a stunning reversal, siding with Paul Jr. The court declared that the buyout option was too vague to be enforced. Paul Sr. could not force his son to sell his shares. It was a massive legal victory. The son everyone thought was down for the count was still standing, and legally his father couldn't get rid of him. The legal war, however, took its toll. For 2 years, the family's dirty laundry was aired in public. The saga finally ended in August 2011 with a settlement. Paul Sr. ultimately purchased his son's 20% stake, officially severing their last business tie. The legal fight was over, but the emotional scars would last a lifetime. This period also battered OCC financially. The massive $12 million custom headquarters they built in 2003 became a huge liability, and it was eventually sold to avoid foreclosure as the show's popularity slumped and the family feud raged. Even as the legal battles raged, Paul Jr. was forced to start over. After leaving OCC in 2009, he was stuck with a one-year non-compete clause, a legal exile that stopped him from building custom motorcycles. Many thought he'd just fade away. But while Paul Sr. may have underestimated his son's talent, he definitely underestimated his resolve. During that year in the wilderness, Paul Jr. didn't stay idle. He pivoted, collaborating with the company Coleman to design a high-end grill. It was a smart move that kept him creative and his business afloat. He and his wife, Rachel, turned a room in their house into an office, hired help, and meticulously planned his comeback. In April 2010, the moment his non-compete clause expired, Paul Jr. made a move that sent shockwaves through the motorcycle world. He opened Paul Jr. Designs right across the street from Orange County Choppers. It was a breathtaking act of defiance, a clear challenge to his father. What happened next was even more shocking. It wasn't just a new business. It was a mutiny. Key figures from OCC, the guys viewers knew and loved, walked away from Paul Sr. and followed Jr. Vinny DiMartino, the talented and reliable mechanic. Joe Pugliafico, the general manager. Even his own brother Mikey, after trying so long to be the peacemaker, sided with his brother and joined the new venture. It was a mass exodus that reportedly left Paul Sr. gutted. The Discovery Channel, always smelling drama, saw gold in the feud. The original American Chopper was canceled in early 2010, but just a few months later it was reborn as American Chopper Sr. vs. Jr. The new series pitted father against son, OCC against Paul Jr. Designs in a series of head-to-head build-offs. The show was an instant hit, and the stakes were higher than ever. Each build was a battle for bragging rights, for validation, for supremacy. And in this new arena, Paul Jr. thrived. Freed from his father's creative constraints, his designs became more ambitious and artistic. He consistently proved his creative superiority, winning the majority of the fan-voted build-offs, often by a huge margin. In one memorable Cadillac-sponsored competition, PJD's sleek design crushed OCC's, proving once and for all who the real creative force was. He wasn't just an artist anymore. He was becoming a master of his craft. He even taught himself how to write G-code for CNC machines, giving him total control over the fabrication process. He was no longer the kid working under his dad's thumb. He was a force of his own, building an empire from the ashes of his former life. The fires of the on-screen rivalry eventually cooled, but the chasm between father and son remained. For over a decade, the tragedy of the Teutul family has been the painful, lingering silence. As of recent reports, Paul Jr. and Paul Sr. lead almost entirely separate lives. The only times they would communicate were when production contracts for various reboots and specials forced them to. The most poignant symbol of this divide is a simple family tradition. In a recent podcast, Paul Jr. confirmed that he and his father haven't shared a holiday meal in over 15 years. That's 15 years of birthdays, Thanksgivings, and Christmases passed in silence, a heartbreaking testament to the depth of the wounds. Personally, Paul Jr. found a peace that his professional life long denied him. During the chaos, he met Rachel Beaster. Their wedding in 2010 was featured on TLC's Say Yes to the Dress, but it was marked by a profound sadness. The chair reserved for the father of the groom remained empty, a silent symbol of the family schism. In 2015, they welcomed their son, Hudson. Becoming a father himself forced Paul Jr. to confront the pain of his own childhood and his fractured relationship with his dad, setting him on a path of healing and faith. Today, Paul Jr. Designs is a thriving brand, and his net worth is estimated to be around $2 million, a testament to his resilience. In early 2025, it was announced he would serve as a Grand Marshal for an American flat track race, a sign of his continued respect in the motorcycle community. Paul Teutul Sr., now in his mid-70s, has also moved on. After facing his own business and legal troubles, he made a major life change. In 2020, he relocated Orange County Choppers from its iconic New York headquarters to Clearwater, Florida. There, he partnered with a businessman to launch the OCC, Roadhouse and Museum, a massive complex with a restaurant, concert venue, and motorcycle museum. It's a bold new chapter, keeping the OCC brand alive in a sunnier climate. And what about Mikey, the gentle giant caught in the middle? After leaving OCC, he briefly joined PJD before striking out on his own, exploring painting and even launching a line of pasta sauces. He tried to find his own path away from the drama. For a while, he was estranged from his father, but in a surprising turn, he's now reportedly back in the fold, helping out at the new Orange County Choppers in Florida. Over the years, there have been brief thaws in the Cold War. A 2020 Discovery special, American Chopper, The Last Ride, brought father and son together to build one final bike. The episode showed glimpses of the old dynamic, the arguments and tension, but also moments of laughter. It gave fans a sliver of hope. But those moments appear to be fleeting, orchestrated for the cameras. Sources close to the show have said their collaborations are strictly business. As of 2025, they are not close. The relationship isn't one of active animosity anymore, but it's not one of affection either. It just exists in a quiet, sad neutrality. The story of the Teutul's is a powerful reminder of how fame, money, and pressure can shatter even the strongest family bonds. What are your thoughts on this epic family saga? Who do you think was ultimately in the right? Let us know down in the comments. And if you found this story fascinating, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories you only thought you knew. The legacy of American Chopper is a complex one. On one hand, it introduced the art of custom motorcycle building to a massive global audience and created some of the most iconic machines of our time. Paul Teutul Jr.'s creativity inspired a generation of builders. On the other hand, it documented the real-time implosion of a family, a heartbreaking tragedy played out for ratings. Paul Teutul Jr.'s journey is the story of a tragic hero. He was the creative genius at the heart of an empire, but that empire was built on a painful and flawed foundation. In the end, he had to lose his family to find himself, breaking free from a toxic environment to build his own legacy, one defined not by anger and conflict, but by faith, family, and a relentless passion for creation. The chrome and steel they once forged together may have rusted, but the story of their rise and fall remains a powerful cautionary tale about the heartbreaking tragedy of Paul Teutul Jr. and the empire that cost him his father.